we seem to be living through a time where we can only filter our place in the world, the movement of culture, the development of history, who we are as nations, who we are as a people, through the filter of oppression and emancipation.
This is pretty troubling. I don't know if you would like to complement that.
Well, you're completely right. But this is because a version of history is being taught in all of our countries to greater or lesser extent, which sees the history of our countries as a history solely of emancipation.
He covets independence and freedom, chafes at boundaries and limits, and tends to find any restriction intolerable. Common symptoms of Puer psychology are dreams of imprisonment and similar imagery. Chains, bars, cages, entrapment, bondage. Life itself, existential reality, is experienced as a prison. Aleister Crowley formulated his own religious outlook called Thelema, which translates as the will. And in his view, he said that we were living through different aeons and we were currently in the Aeon of Horus. I don't believe that we are, but I think it's a useful framework and model for understanding the challenges that are so unique to the times that we're living through and how they relate to Jungian concepts of the shadow and of the Puer Aeternus, which means the eternal child. Horus is the child of Osiris and Isis in Egyptian mythology, and he is the hawk-headed god. When you see people going on about the eye of the Illuminati, they're talking about the eye of Horus. He flies over everything and can see with great clarity. In Crowley's description, he said that we had been through three phases. We've been through a phase of matriarchal systems of governance. That was the phase of Isis. Then through patriarchal systems of governance, which was the phase of Osiris. And now we're living through the phase of Horus. This is Crowley. In the history of the world, as far as we know accurately, are three such gods. Isis, the mother, when the universe was conceived as simple nourishment, drawn directly from her. As I said last night, I actually think this is a circuit that all human beings have to develop when they are children in order to become fully fledged adults, free from, neurotic issues. This period is marked by matriarchal government. Next, beginning 500 BC, Osiris, the father, when the universe was imagined as catastrophic, love, death, resurrection as the method by which experience was built up. This corresponds to patriarchal systems. Crowley had a very dim view of patriarchal systems of governance, as we'll see as we move forward. Now, Horus, the child, in which we come to perceive events as a continual growth, partaking in its elements of both these methods. So it's an integration, it's a unification of the mother and the father, the yin and the yang. We're seeking to integrate it in the age of Horus. And so there is a hermaphroditic, is that an adjective? Element to the age that we're living through. These methods are not to be overcome by circumstance. This present period involves the recognition of the individual as the unit of society. So, do I think that there was literally three phases? No, I think that Crowley, intelligent chap that he was, is using a poetic, mystical way of drawing order onto the chaos of life. There is no evidence that we went through a period of matriarchal governance. No proper historical evidence. Though you'll hear this myth perpetuated in different places, it is mysticism. It's a nice idea. It would be nice if we'd given that a go and then gone to patriarchal governance, and then here we are. There would be an orderliness to that. There would be the mummy phase, the daddy phase, and now we're in the integrated child or teenager phase. So why is this of interest? Because we have some challenges in this time that we're obviously struggling with as it pertains to our place in the world, who we want to be, our individualism, what we're going to do with the shiny new toys that we have, represented by technology and by ideology, and the tremendous damage that we're capable of doing to ourselves and to each other because of the phase that we're in. Crowley wrote a book called The Book of the Law, and he wrote this in 1904, and he had some very interesting things to say about the age that we're living through. This is from the Book of the Law. He rules the present period of 2,000 years, beginning in 1904. Everywhere his government is taking root. This is Horus. Observe for yourselves the decay of the sense of sin, the growth of innocence and irresponsibility, the strange modifications of the reproductive instinct with a tendency to become bisexual or epicene, the childlike confidence in progress combined with nightmare fear of catastrophe against which we are yet half unwilling to take precautions. I mean, this is so modern. He could be talking about the last year that we've been through. Childlike confidence in progress combined with nightmare fear of catastrophe is 2020. Back to Crowley. Consider the outcrop of dictatorships, only possible when moral growth is in its earliest stages, and the prevalence of infantile cults like communism, fascism, pacifism, health crazes, occultism in nearly all its forms, religion sentimentalized to the point of practical extinction. Consider the popularity of the cinema, the wireless, the football pools and guessing competitions, all devices for soothing fractious infants, no seed of purpose in them. Consider sport, the babyish enthusiasms and rages which it excites, whole nations disturbed by disputes between boys. Consider war, the atrocities which occur daily and leave us unmoved and hardly worried. We are children. That's from Aleister Crowley writing in the Book of the Law. So this will lead into the observations that Jung made about 10 to 15 years later. And maybe the reason why Jung never referenced Crowley is because he used his material but was embarrassed. So he just didn't want to say where he got it from. I think I have caught Jung and Freud cherry picking, pulling ideas from popular fiction, and both of them as well nicking ideas from ancient mystical practices and not crediting them for two reasons. One would be embarrassment. You wouldn't want to say that you come up with a new psychological theory after reading a pop book. It would be like saying, I watched the Avengers and then I have this idea for you. And also what both of them were hoping was that nobody would realize, where they stole from Freud as nicked things from Jewish mysticism and then claimed them as, and then reworded them and claimed them as own. And Jung 100% has stolen from Egyptian mythology and recast it as theories of psychology. But we'll get into that in another video because it's really interesting. And I don't think it discredits them or makes them look any less important. It's just interesting. It's of note. Back to Aleister Crowley with his view of the modern age that we were entering into from his book, The Book of the Law, from 1904. Crowley. Democracy dodders, ferocious fascism, cackling communism, equally frauds, cavort crazily all over the globe. They are hemming us in. They are abortive births of child with a capital C to represent Horus, the eternal child god. Above us today hangs a danger never yet paralleled in history. We suppress the individual in more and more ways. We think in terms of the herd. War no longer kills soldiers, it kills all indiscriminately. Every new measure of the most democratic and autocratic governments is communistic in essence. I agree 100%. I'm amazed that he could see this so long ago. Back to Crowley. It is always restriction. We are all treated as imbecile children. He goes on. Dora, the Shops Act, the motoring laws, Sunday suffocation, the censorship. They won't trust us to cross the roads at will. Fascism is like communism and dishonest into the bargain. The dictators suppress all art, literature, theatre, music, news that does not meet their requirements. Yet the world only moves by the light of genius. The herd will be destroyed in mass. The establishment of the law of Thelema, this is from Crowley's own religion, is the only way to preserve individual liberty and to assure the future of the race. As I said, Thelema is, I think it's Greek for will. So his idea was around the disciplining and fortification of the individual will as guided by the principle of love. In the words of the famous paradox of Comte de Phoenix, the absolute rule of the state shall be a function of the absolute liberty of each individual will. So, Crowley paints a pretty dim view of the time that we're living in, even though he himself has coined the term, the concept of the Aeon of Horus. And he says it's about reclaiming individuality. It's about reclaiming our individuality and of embracing the new and of coming into spiritual alignment. It comes with a great warning. And I see in this an element of the kind of the paradox or the dichotomy of the tarot. You pull a tarot card and it can either be positively aspected or ill aspected. So positively aspected, this could be a time where technology under will moves the consciousness of humanity forward, and we can literally choose to consciously evolve our consciousness. Ill aspected, we would become swamped in our own infantile, puerile shadow, and we would use technology to gamble, to wank, to titillate ourselves with meaningless bits and pieces of crap that we don't need to buy, or utterly pointless, utterly ideologically infected entertainment, which isn't really entertainment anymore. It's all a form of hyper-politicized brainwashing at this point. So now to Jung. He spoke of the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. I read this morning that you can also talk about the goal is Puer. So there's Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy, the eternal child God who is a little boy, but there are also such a thing as Puer Aeternus, which would be the eternal goal. Boys and girls who don't want to grow up. It's not just an issue of men or masculinity or women or femininity. It's all of us. We're struggling to grow up through a negatively aspected version of the Age of Horus. This is not from Jung. This is from a gentleman called Mr. Sharp. I'll give full references in the information bar, defining what Jung meant when he was talking about the concept of the eternal child God, the Puer Aeternus. Puer Aeternus, Latin for eternal child, used in mythology to designate a child God who is forever young. Psychologically, it refers to an older man whose emotional life has remained at an adolescent level, usually coupled with too great a dependence on the mother. That would be, let's just remember here, footnote, this would be all of us. So all of us, men and women, are kind of stuck in a hyper-dependence on the mother, meaning, you know, being kept in a safe space or being obsessed with safe spaces where all of our needs are taken care of for us. The word matrix actually means womb. So we're never more taken care of or safer than when we're in the womb. So it's interesting because when I saw the film The Matrix, I thought The Matrix was the numbers. And at the end of the film, it kind of implies that, like, the sort of epiphany of the main character at the end of the film is when he sees the numbers. I was like, oh, he's seeing the Matrix, which is like, that's a different, I think it's from mathematics, matrices. That's where I was getting it. But actually, the film The Matrix of the film is the pod. It's actually about the pod and the podding and the wombifying of humanity. And I think the horrifying thing about the Matrix is when he red pills from the pod, he actually has to go and live in another pod, which then flies through the Matrix, if you remember. It gets very vague. So Neo wakes up But what does he wake up to? He wakes up to a reality. He was asleep in a dream of a normal life. He red pills, has this traumatic experience, only to wake up to another level of being hermetically sealed inside a different pod, but just slightly more miserable, but more aware. So he gains in awareness and in misery in like an equal amount. I think when people say this is a Gnostic movie, I think that's one of the clearest reasons why it's a Gnostic movie. You grow in awareness and in misery in equal amounts, but there's no escape. He actually then is still in the Matrix. And when he does whatever he does, which again, the film cleverly kind of gleans over the top of it, all the wonderful action sequences, he's dreaming them. He's not doing them. It's a fantasy. It's a computer game that he's playing. He's plugged in. He himself is a scabby, weak, protein porridge sustained, rag covered little man in a pod that's perpetually being pursued by robots with a bunch of other scabby looking people. So there is that element there of this matrixing of humanity. And I think we want it. I have always claimed that the Matrix, the story of the Matrix, according to the canon of the Matrix, was there was a war between humanity and the machines. Artificial intelligence wakes up and decides that humanity is dangerous. So there is a war fought between humanity and the machines, and then the machines forcibly put humans into the pods against their will. And I was like, yeah, it's interesting. It's a really cool story. It's kind of like Skynet and the Terminator taken one step further. But I claim you would never need to force humanity into pods. Just make pods and they will jump in. They'll jump right back into the womb because that's what people want. I think this is where we see the obsession with safety, safe spaces, and being completely taken care of. It's a desire. It's an over-attachment to the mother. Sorry, I broke that up there with a little digression. There was actually a large digression. So back to Sharp. We finished on usually coupled with too great a dependence on the mother, the Matrix. The Puer typically leads a provisional life. Millennials. Due to the fear of being caught in a situation from which it might not be possible to escape. His lot is seldom what he really wants, and one day he will do something about it, but not just yet. Plans for the future slip away in fantasies of what will be, what could be, while no decisive action is taken to change. What does this generation have as a term? It's had it for a while now. FOMO, the fear of missing out. It's a meme, it's a concept. He covets independence and freedom, chafes at boundaries and limits, and tends to find any restriction intolerable. Common symptoms of Puer psychology are dreams of imprisonment and similar imagery. Chains, bars, cages, entrapment, bondage. Life itself, existential reality, is experienced as a prison. The bars are unconscious ties to the unfettered world of early life. It's easy here to see a parallel with certain toxic ideologies that are obsessed, so obsessed with ideas of oppression and emancipation and of imprisonment that we can satirize it by talking about the oppression Olympics, which the first time I ever heard that, it was Candace Owens that said it. Because there is an Olympics at play. There's like a point scoring system where the more oppressed you are, the better it is and the more points you get. How could that be anything other than an expression of this Puer psychology and the symptom of the age, the Aeon of Horus? We continue. This from von Franz, all references given in the more information bar. Precisely because the Puer entertains false pretensions, he becomes collectivized from within, with the result that none of his reactions are really very personal or very special. He becomes a type, the type of the Puer Aeternus. He becomes an archetype. And if you become that, you are not at all original. Not at all yourself and something special, but just an archetype. One can foretell what a Puer Aeternus will look like and how he will feel. He is merely the archetype of the eternal youth God. and therefore he has all the features of the god. He has a nostalgic longing for death. He thinks of himself as being something special. He is the one sensitive being among all the other tough sheep. He will have a problem with an aggressive, destructive shadow, which he will not want to live, and generally projects, and so on. There is nothing special whatsoever. The greater the identification with the youthful god, the Puer Aeternus, the less individual the person, although he himself feels so very special. Millennials, joking. It's all of us. We're all millennials now. We're all millennials. I have said before that one of the effects of frequent and consistent social media usage is that we become more and more alienated from ourselves. Alienated in the Marxist sense, but we're not here just alienated from what would Marx say? Like your work and the fruits of your labor. It's not so good to be alienated from that, but we're alienated from ourselves. We're split self from self. Social media usage over time, a highly narcissistic culture over time, that which worships the child god Horus and the Puer Aeternus, it renders us all the same. It's homogenizing. So it's universalizing because we all have to meet in the middle to manifest as the archetype of Horus and the archetype of the Puer Aeternus. We talk diversity, we talk multiculturalism, but actually, I mean, if you look at social media culture, if you look at year on year, Facebook, Instagram, it's becoming more and more of a restricted and homogenizing space. There's less and less diversity. We talk more and more diversity and multiculturalism, but what we're producing is less and less and less of it. And the window for diversity of thought, of being, of characters is shrinking all the time. The invisible walls are closing in. And what von Franz is suggesting here, back in the year 2000 he was writing, is that this is actually because we have become possessed in a Jungian sense by the collective shadow that we've disavowed of the Puer Aeternus archetype. Again, back to Gnosticism. Archetype has the same root as archon. It means ruler. And if you look at the Puer Aeternus archetype as von Franz describes it, it's incapable of originality. It's incapable of real creativity because it's a manifestation of the Puer Aeternus. Well, what do we know about the archons and their relationship with humans in the Gnostic worldview? Archons are machine-like. They are excellent replicators. They can create brilliant simulations, but they're not capable of original thought, and that's why they need humans for that originality, because they can't do it. They need us in the Gnostic worldview. And so you can see a kind of archontic homogenization and brainwashing, where we all become sort of archontic through this ill-aspected Puer Aeternus, and we can't produce anything original. We're all just replicating what somebody else said, and we're bad photocopies of bad photocopies, and the original thing is, I don't know, 17 people or manifestations removed. Look at meme culture. Look at the way in which we're just sharing what everybody else has already said, because the top thing you can be in social media is well liked and well followed. In the capitalist sense, the capital of social media, the points in the game that we're seeking to win, is likes and follows. Well, the surest way to win likes and follows is to just copy what already won likes and follows. So it's not idle conjecture to say that it's homogenizing. It's right there. Any intelligent 14-year-old could grasp what I just said. If we set up a system, if we set up a game where the points are likes and follows, the fastest way to win that game is to look at what other people are being liked and followed for and to be that. And now we have archetypes like the Instagram model. They all do and say exactly the same thing. They even strike the same poses to the same tracks. And nobody says, hey, this isn't very original, you're just copying. which they would have done when I was a kid, you're congratulated for that. This is narcissism, but it is a different kind of narcissism. The people that we're talking about who are narcissistic want to get along. They're not our version of grandiose narcissism where they're annoying, they're contrarian, they insist upon their way of doing things. No, they're actually quite pro-social. They can emulate humility. They can emulate submission. They can emulate conformity. In fact, they're quite happy to conform as long as they get their narcissistic supply. We may need a new type or category of narcissism to really describe this, because when people have said to me, oh, look at social media, this is grandiose narcissism, I've always resisted that. I'm like, it's not quite. It's too conformist to be grandiose narcissism. And there's something subtly self-deprecating about it all. There's something too insincere, too performative about it to qualify for me, in my not so humble opinion, as classic grandiose narcissism. And I wouldn't just flip the switch and say, oh no, it's vulnerable narcissism either. This is something else. This is something else. And I don't even know if it's in the person. So I can't say it's a personality disorder. It's more like a collective consciousness, archetypal collectivism that we're paying a tithe to, or what is the other thing you pay? Not tithes necessarily, but you can pay to have the church sort of bless you. You can pay your way out of hell. Tithing is something you would consistently do as a discipline to give to the poor. These are actual payments to a church. They're payments to a religion. What's the religion? The religion of Horus, the ill aspect of Aeon of Horus, of narcissism, of look at me. You're paying to the church of look at me. And what are you paying with? Well, you're paying with time, you're paying with attention, you're paying with ideological submission. I continue here. When parents are very strict with their children and they demand a lot of obedience, it's easy to think, oh, that's a good thing, because as adults, we don't like noise, and we don't like noisy children, and we don't like children running around and screaming, and we don't like the irritation of children, asking us why they have to do the things we told them to do. I get it, 100%, totally get it. But as somebody involved in psychology, I know that if you entrain children into blind submission, you're basically creating codependence to be abused at an individual level by narcissists and psychopaths in their adulthood, or by church, by state, by corporations as they move through life. When I wrote this, I didn't keep... Who wrote that? Oh, that was Franz again. Franz again. The last quote I just gave you. I just panicked there because in the Word document I didn't write down who the source was. So I'd like to finish here with 2 points. One is this idea of the obsession with oppression and being enslaved and imprisoned is an aspect of the Puer Aeternus, is an aspect of the ill-aspected Aeon of Horus that we're living through. And you have writer and speaker Douglas Murray often talks about this, that we seem to be living through a time where we can only filter our place in the world, the movement of culture, the development of history, who we are as nations, who we are as a people, through the filter of oppression and emancipation.
This is pretty troubling. I don't know if you would like to complement that.
Well, you're completely right. But this is because a version of history is being taught in all of our countries to greater or lesser extent, which sees the history of our countries as a history solely of emancipation. Exactly. Emancipation, first of all, of the citizenry from the kings and princes, then emancipation of the working classes, then emancipation of women, then emancipation of gay people, emancipation of ethnic minorities, and so on and so on. But this is only one story. This is only one story in history. It's one that you can play several different ways around. But you know, it is not the sole story of any of our countries, and it is being taught as if it is. And of course, the danger of it, as you know, and any conservative must know, the danger of it is that it, among other things, says that is how history will continue to have to be. And that's why we have this strange phenomenon of people scurrying around to find the next rights battles to fight viciously. Because they find meaning and historical purpose.
The next victims.
The next victims.
Has oppression occurred historically? Yes. Has emancipation occurred historically? Yes. Is oppression bad? Of course it is. It's a terrible thing. It's like saying evil is bad. Oppressing people is bad. It doesn't matter who they are. It's really bad. Have people at times been emancipated? Yes. We have made progress. But is this the only way to understand history? And if we're obsessed with this, isn't it going to warp our history? I mean, isn't it puerile to insist on only looking at our history through the lens of oppression and emancipation? I have something to tell you. I watched on Netflix recently, it's a series about pirates. And it was really interesting to get the whole history of piracy, because it's an essential part of my history as a Brit, and the development of the British Empire throughout the world really can't be divided from, you know, broad scale like drug smuggling and theft and you know, gangsterism, basically. The gangsters of the high seas, these were the highwaymen of the oceans, because they were good sailors and they were good at it, and they did these things. But what I liked about the series is it didn't have the implicit coordinates of seeing everything through emancipation and oppression. Emancipation and oppression is part of the story. You know, the working class sailors, they're press ganged into being on these ships where life is extremely tough. They're eating crap food, and there's so many ways you can die at sea, especially in those times. Disease, other pirates taking from you, you know, you just tumble overboard, or other pirates or other sailors could kill you. You could be killed by your own people for some infraction. But it doesn't focus on that. It just focuses on telling the history. And when we expand out from emancipation and oppression, we can see things so much more clearly. We can have a positively aspected Eye of Horus. I want to finish with talking briefly about the tarot. I won't strain you if you're not interested in the tarot. Just of note, when Aleister Crowley developed his own tarot called the Thoth Tarot, he put Horus at number 20 in the major arcana, which is traditionally the card of judgment. When the tarot card of judgment, number 20, Crowley's Horus card, is positively aspected, we engage in a process of a great calling. So in the Rider-Waite Tarot, you have the image of the Archangel Gabriel blowing a trumpet and people coming out of their graves. The dead will rise. So there's that moment, that biblical moment of the day of judgment, the rebirth of people. In the Crowley Tarot, it is Horus is sat there and has one hand raised. The yang right hand, the masculine hand, is raised to heaven, and the left hand, the feminine yin hand, is pointing down to Mother Earth, Father Heaven, Mother Earth. The idea is that the yin and yang is integrated in his moment. So we can have a positive aspect where we are reborn, where we die to what was the past, because our past is a mixed bag. Of course it is. At a collective level, at a national level, let him without sin cast the first stone. If you want to focus on horror, no tribe of humanity owns horror. All of humanity's history entails an element of genocide, torture, death, child abuse. You know, the greatest challenge we as a species face is carrying and processing and hopefully healing from our intergenerational trauma. And the hope here, the optimism here, with the positively aspected Aeon of Horus is, if we can do the work and reintegrate our shadow, if we can face our past and be reborn, and we can obey the call, then we can achieve absolution. In its negative aspect, we turn away from the responsibility. We turn away from the work of dealing with our own shadow. What did we do? It's so easy to stand on the sidelines in the gladiatorial 24/7 arena of social media and mainstream media and shout, boo, 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 you're bad, kill him, kill him, kill him. Well, what about you? What are you doing? What are you doing with your life? What are you doing? There's a scene, I'm so sorry to do this. It's from the TV show where the tough Boston gangster goes down to work in Hollywood, and he takes his tough Boston father with him. He's called Raymond. What's the show called? Is it called Tough Boston Raymond? I can't remember. I can't remember what it's called. He drives around in this really cool Mercedes. And, you know, he's kind of like, it's this trope. He's surrounded by these soft Californians, and he's this tough Boston guy, and he just beats them up. It's kind of like Get Shorty, if you remember the old film Get Shorty with John Travolta. But anyway, the father does this, it's Angelina Jolie's father in real life. He's from LA, but he's trying to do a Boston accent, and it's really bad, but it's wonderful. Like, it's so good. And he's accused by Raymond of doing something terrible because he's a gangster. He's a low-level gangster. He goes around robbing banks. And at one point in the TV series, he turns to his son, trying to do a Boston accent badly, and he says, "What did you do, Raymond? What did you do?" And every time people are screaming and shouting and saying, you know, kill him in the gladiatorial arena. Look at this person. Look at what they did. Look at this nation. Look at this country. Look at these people. They're so awful. I never think like quietly like, oh, the biblical story of Jesus where the woman is about to be stoned to her death for infidelity or whatever it was. And he turns to the people and says, "Let he without sin cast the first stone." And they say, "I cannot, for in my heart I have sinned." You know, even if I have never done anything, in my mind, in my heart, I cannot cast the first stone. I never think that. I just think of this guy going, "What did you do, Raymond? What did you do?" You can literally just look up that search term in Google, in YouTube, and you'll find the 15-second clip. I love it. It's beautiful. What did you do, Raymond? What did you do? So, we have to look to ourselves. It's easy to chant. It's easy to be part of the mob. It's easy to tear down. It's easy to be reactive and to say, this is wrong. So we say, well, what do you want? I don't know. Not this. Oh, well, that's mature. As an adult, you're going to have to act. It's like you have agency. No, the system has infinitely oppressed me. And now look, I have a whole host of mental health issues and I couldn't do anything. Why? Because the system has done the thing. And I have like a folder full of crimes done by the system. Okay, well, that's great. See your life that you have right now and that you've been living for the last 5 years. That's your life forevermore. Is that what you want? Is that what you want? You want to be an echo to the narcissist. Whatever bad thing happened, you're just responding to that. There was the Big Bang, and then which was an event, and you're just the echo of that. The perpetual victim. You'll always be Jesus on the cross. You'll never resurrect. There'll be no rebirth. There'll be no work for you to do. There won't be any sense of like, okay, wow, I got smashed. There's evil in the world. Now let me pick up a sword and go and fight back. No, there's just you just living your own victimhood forevermore, your own oppression forevermore. You'll never get down from that cross. You'll never be born again. Okay, cool. Good luck with that. When the card is negatively aspected and reversed, shows up upside down after you've shuffled it, we are full of self-doubt and we have a very harsh inner critic and we ignore the call. I just did a video on this channel that you can see last night on the inner critic and how to resolve it. It's not easy. It's not easy. I'm not saying that oppression doesn't exist. I'm not saying that trauma doesn't exist. I'm not saying that mental health issues don't exist. That would be lunacy for me to say that. Like, it would make no sense whatsoever. Evil has existed. Enslaving people is wrong. Torturing people is wrong. Genocide is wrong. It has happened. Okay, so now what? What are we going to do to make the world better so that it's less likely that that will happen again? We can't stop it from happening again because evil exists, but let's make less of it happen in the future. That seems to be a reasonable thing to aim towards. So when it is positively aspected, we have judgment, good judgment, the capacity to judge the world clearly, the capacity to see with the positively aspected eye of Horus, the bird's eye view. Horus is a hawk, he sees clearly. To integrate masculine and feminine, to integrate yin and yang, and to express it positively with humility and with courage, and to obey the call. We'll come to the call in a moment. If it's negatively aspected, we tumble into our shadow. We remain stuck in our victimhood narrative, our oppression narratives, and we ignore the call, and then all we have is a life of guilt and shame where we're being harangued internally by the inner critic. Here I end with my favorite theme, the Gospel of Thomas, which is classed as a Gnostic gospel. If what is within you is brought forth from you, what is within you will save you. If what is within you is left within you, what is within you will destroy you. There is a solution to the dilemma of the Puer and Puer Aeternus, to being in a negatively aspected Aeon of Horus, but it's not an easy one. What I think is happening is that we are being, so I too, like Crowley or like Jung, bring order where there is none. I'm putting a frame that is false. It's a false frame. I'm bringing, linguistically, I'm using words and thoughts to bring order to something that has no order to it. I'm not claiming this is real, but I would claim that this is a good mythology or narrative or philosophy for us to embrace. Let's obey the call. Whatever is within us, let's call it forth and let it save us. But that takes courage, that takes humility. It's fun to throw rocks. It's fun to be hiding in the crowd and, you know, somebody who was once this big daddy oppressor, now he's getting it, you know, stab him in the back. There'll be no response. I'll never be called for it. People will just congratulate me. Oh, you're brave. The way you ran over like a little coward and stabbed him in the back and stuff. I don't know whether he deserves it or not. Maybe he does. But is that me? I want to live like that. Really? Where's my self-respect going to come from if that's me? If that's all I am? The person who stands on the sidelines and calls people out? No. I as an individual need to break free from the collective. I need to stop abrogating my responsibility and giving it to ideology, giving it to the Puer Aeternus, giving it to the church of performative narcissism and the negatively aspected Aeon of Horus. I need to be a man. You need to be a man. You need to be a woman. You need to be an adult. We must grow from this adolescent phase. If what is within you is brought forth, what is within you will save you. If what is within you is left within you, what is within you will destroy you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and I look forward to speaking to you all again very soon. Cheers.